Have you heard of NTID, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf? They're one of the 9 colleges at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Okay, sure, of course you've heard of it, but did you know that they have an art gallery that collects and displays artwork by deaf or hard of hearing artists? We visited the Dyer Art Center and spent some time with the gallery director to learn more. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Tabitha Jacques. I'm the director of the Dyer Art Center here. With me is my interpreter, Nicole. We're here at RIT NTID, the Rochester Institute of Technology at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf in Rochester, New York. Today we're going to be talking about deaf art, deaf culture, and the very unique parts of deaf art. NTID is one of 2 federally funded universities for deaf and hard of hearing students in the United States. We're very lucky here to have collected artwork starting in 1968. That's when NTID opened to educate deaf and hard of hearing students. We're the only one in the nation that exhibits deaf art regularly to the public. Maybe people don't understand why it's so important to collect arts done by deaf people, but the mainstream museums don't quite understand the specialty that is deaf art, and they feel that it might not fit with their aesthetic overall. So it's been passed by over the years, and deaf artists are labeled as disabled, not as artists in their own right. So we've been very aggressive in searching and preserving and collecting art done by deaf artists. The paintings I'm standing in front of have a very common theme of the deaf experience. 90% of deaf individuals are born to hearing parents, so their experience may involve more loneliness compared to the other 10% who are born to deaf parents who communicate clearly with their children. So a lot of that is expressed via artwork. They express their frustration, their struggle, their experience of being forced to have audio therapy. They feel very isolated and a bit cast off. So in their art, we see a lot of aspects of the ears being smaller than normal. The eyes are very large, the mouth is very large. Sometimes the ears are very large in size. You see hearing devices, the old-time hearing aids, the emphasis on speech therapy. You see a lot of themes of loneliness in deaf artwork. And deaf art tends to be very, very colorful. The piece done by Betty G. Miller, it's called Spectrum. People might look at it and not notice all the different aspects of the work, but the individuals in the painting have lines that would make them look like puppets. That speaks to the theme of speech therapy that many deaf individuals experience growing up. But if you look in the background of the piece, you'll see people waving their hands. There are people signing in the background. There's a lot of pride for people who are using ASL, while the individuals in the front are lacking energy and are just standing there looking like marionettes. This piece was done by Morris Broderson. It's Sound of the Flower. This one, I believe, shows a person who is a bit alien in the face and ears, looks a bit like a child, but not quite human, listening to the sound of a flower, or attempting to listen to the sound of a flower. It's an experience of isolation that a deaf person feels, and they don't understand what sound is, what makes a sound, and what doesn't make a sound. Hence the person in the portrait trying to listen to a flower. This is done by Mary Rapazzo. It's called A Party of One. It was painted in 2012. Many people appreciate this painting because it so significantly connects with their experience as a deaf person in a hearing family. that experience of going to family gatherings and sitting at the dinner table, not understanding what the hearing people speaking English are talking about. There's a sense of isolation. I enjoy finding a lot of deaf artists who talk about the deaf experience and they just want to be a person in the world who happens to be deaf. They want to show their view of the world through their art. So I hope people will come and visit the Dyer Art Center and learn more about the collections that we have. It's a very unique place. And I believe that deaf studies and deaf culture and history is becoming an emerging field of study now. And it's creating fascination to do more research and more teaching. It is its own genre that's burgeoning at this point.
For more information about the Dyer Art Center, visit their website at rit.edu/ntid/dyerarts. This segment was produced as part of the Move to Include initiative with funding provided by the Golisano Foundation.